thank you very much. I'm Rebecca Patterson. I am on the board of the Bretton Woods Committee, and I'm absolutely delighted to be with you all today. And with the World Bank President, Ajay Banga, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you.
I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, you'd like a hole in the head.
Yeah. No, it's going to be great. Look, Kristalina Georgieva just told us that the world is slowing down, but there won't be a global recession. A few people this morning at other meetings I was at said maybe the U.S. will have a little recession, but we're not going to talk about the U.S. I want to talk about the countries you're focused on. And in the context of a slowing global economy, you wrote a piece at the beginning of this month in the Financial Times that I thought very clearly laid out your priorities, right? You're looking at energy security, you're looking at private sector investment, and importantly, looking at job creation. Not outsourcing jobs from places like the United States, but really organic job creation that's being created through organic growth in these countries. So I wanted to start out with that, just very high level. What are you doing? What is the World Bank doing to drive that growth agenda? How's it going?
So, I mean, look, first of all, thanks for having me every year, and it's nice to see a number of familiar faces. I don't think that you should think of my jobs conversation in the context of changes in the world's global growth estimate. Because I started talking about jobs a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And so I want to disconnect the connection of today's volatility and uncertainty, which is the background of the discussion of people estimating whether there will be a recession or there'll be a slowdown. That's the background of that conversation. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the view that 1.2 billion young people are entering the global workforce. Whether they get a job or not, they're going to become eligible for a job in the coming 12 to 15 years. Currently, the same emerging market countries where these 1.2 billion are coming from are forecast to generate 420 million jobs. Now, forecasts are not destiny, and forecasts are made by economists like friends of mine in the audience. And I will tell you that I used to be an economist, or I'm a recovering economist. And if we make assumptions, and then we project the assumptions, and we sound like we know what we're doing. So don't assume that 420 is correct, but it's not 1.2 billion. Mm. There's a huge gap there. And that gap, to me, is a very serious challenge, both for global consumption and its growth, but also for what I'm really worried about, which is fragility, conflict, violence, illegal migration, that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so my view is we don't have 25 years to figure this out. We've got a decade to get ahead of this issue. And if you want to have this demographic dividend not be it should be a light at the end of the tunnel, not a train coming our way, then we need to get ahead of this on jobs. That's where I was coming from. Of course, you can't generate jobs without growth. That's Kristalina's point. But I think it's way beyond that, because growth by itself doesn't generate jobs. You can get growth with a lower level of job creation, or you can get targeted work and policies. So, for example, our Jobs Council, which is chaired by President Tharman of Singapore and former President Michelle Bachelet of Chile, we just had our meeting yesterday as well again. And we had a big jobs kickoff meeting a little while ago in the World Bank. And essentially, we've got three things that need to happen. Infrastructure, which enables, bridges, roads, airports, schooling, education, healthcare, digital, electricity, stuff like that. Regulations that enable the flywheel to work. Land reform, labor reform, bankruptcy law, mobile collateral law, electricity tariffs, those kinds of words. And then you need to get the private sector, whether small, medium, large, global or local, farmers or businesses, to actually generate the jobs. That connection of the three, we think we are uniquely positioned to help. We have IDA and IBRD that do infrastructure. We have the Knowledge Bank that understands regulatory reform. And more, we are putting our policy budgetary support to countries directly connected to changes in laws. Today, 54% of our budgetary support is paid on a pay-for-results basis. You change the law, we'll give you the money. You don't change the law, you're not getting the money. So to give you an example, If I want you to make the utility, electricity utility in your country more capable of surviving, that means you need to change the tariffs you charge. Ideally, you should charge more from people who can afford to pay more and less from people who can't afford it. So rather than just raise the price across the board, you need intelligent meters to be installed. You need the cost for that. I'll cover that through a budgetary operation. Mm-hmm. But I'll give it to you if you announce the change in policy. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then you can get the private sector with IFC and MEGA and ICSID, our Settlement of Investment Dispute Arm, to kind of help get that flywheel going. That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about 5 sectors. And the 5 sectors we are discussing are sectors which do not require the outsourcing of OECD jobs into the developing world. And I've been saying this for the past years. The challenge of the old model of trade, which said, take a job from here and move it there, is a very challenging model. We need to think a little bit differently about this. And one of the ways we can think about it is these 5 sectors. What are the 5? Infrastructure, bridges, roads, airport stuff, constructed. The construction, but the enablement. Second, agriculture as a business. Mm-hmm. If you want smallholder farmers to stop selling their land and becoming urban poor, then start thinking about their productivity with cooperatives, better access to fertilizer, seeds, crop insurance, that kind of stuff, markets, that space. Third is primary healthcare, not just because you'll get a healthier workforce, but because you will get employment for nurses, medical diagnostic technicians, midwives, PPE manufacturing, pharma manufacturing, that space. Fourth is tourism, with all the benefits it brings. And fifth is manufacturing, both for local consumption and regional and bilateral deals. But take minerals and metals that the emerging markets are full of. If you start doing the right kind of value-added manufacturing locally, then everyone benefits. Mm-hmm. These are not traditionally the way that the old method of growth in East Asia worked. And so it's a different way of doing it. And I just think it's worth paying attention to. So I said somebody asked me in the jobs session, what's your closing comment? And I said, listen, a friend of mine once said that poverty is a state of mind as much as it is a state of being. The being is the earning, the mind is the dignity of a job. Mm-hmm. A job is the best way to kill poverty. You don't get jobs by relying on governments alone. You need to get the private sector in the game. We have to understand how to play this flywheel the right way. And that's the effort I'm trying to make. And if we do this well, the private sector wins, governments win, MDBs win, but most importantly, young people win. Yeah. And I don't understand what the heck is wrong with that idea. There's nothing wrong with that idea.
There's nothing wrong with that idea.
That's the purpose.
So what you laid out,
though... It's a long way to explain.
No, it's great. I appreciate you being comprehensive about it. We're talking about trying to get a lot done in a decade or so. So these young people coming up in age are going to have jobs. We don't have that migration, social unrest, et cetera, right? We have the positive light instead of the train wreck. But getting all that done in what frankly is a short period of time requires moving pretty quickly, being very efficient. And I've had the opportunity to hear you here before, and you've talked a lot since you joined the World Bank almost 2 years ago now about efficiency and making the World Bank operate more efficiently. And you've talked about markers you have, things you're doing. Give us an update. How is that going?
By the way, just before I do that, the effort to connect 300 million people to electricity in Africa,
yes,
which we call M300, is built on the premise of getting the right regulatory reform done in countries for the private sector to come in.
And that's a great example of this, right? 300 people in 300 million, people in Africa by 2030.
Yeah.
That is fast.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get that done on time or close to on time, I'm going to give it to you. You're going to be on time. Then you've got to do this super efficiently. How do you do it?
Well, so you do various things. And the first thing is you get the bank to be more efficient and faster. So it used to take us 19 months on the average to take a project from conversation to approval through the board. We're now down to 14 months, and my target is 12 by the end of Jan. I think a couple of my regions are already below 12. A couple of them are still higher than 12. So I got to figure out where the average comes in. But more importantly, inside the average are lots of projects that are getting approved in 30, 60, and 90 days.
That's great.
So a healthcare clinic set in Kenya is approved in 30 days. A correspondent banking system for the Pacific Islands to enable them to continue to offer banking, which otherwise was becoming a problem, was approved from start to finish in 8 months. But a hydroelectric dam in Central Asia will take 3 years because it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's got all kinds of implications, from construction challenges to land acquisition challenges to ESF issues. It's got hair on it, right? Like me. So the trouble is, you got to treat that differently from somebody else, and that's the kind of thing that's inside the 12-month average. The second thing we're doing is 40 countries now have a single country manager for the World Bank Group. No longer an IFC head, no longer a IBRD ID head. It's one person. So you as a client in the country have one person to go to. You don't have to go to the same project. It's a public-private partnership. I got to get IDA to do this and IFC to do that. And you go to one person, one system through it. We signed in collaboration with the Asian Development Bank. We've now signed what people have wanted for 35 years, a full mutual reliance framework. What does that mean in English? If I do due diligence and they're co-financing with me, they accept my due diligence. If they do it, I take it. Which means you as a client don't go through 2 diligences with banks, you go through one. That kind of stuff, a digital platform in which all the MDBs now put their projects and we co-finance off it as compared to I source it, then I take it to him and then to her and make that 3 times for the client. That's now one platform. 170 projects are in it. $14 billion of financing has already happened. All this is in the last 8 to 10 months. Similarly, we've raised about 100-odd billion through capital adequacy measures, loan to equity ratio, hybrid capital, portfolio guarantees, that kind of stuff. That to me is interesting, but it's over a decade, so who cares? The more interesting parts are the speed and the working better across the group. What I'm now trying to get to is to get the corporate scorecard completely ready. We committed to go from 155 items to 22. We've gone from how many projects and how many dollars financed to how many people got a better job because of a skilling institute we set up. Not only that, you can go on the website, you can click on each of these, and you can click your way down to the individual project. And I know that's going to get us into trouble because I won't always meet what I thought we would do. But I think sunlight is my best friend. Sunlight's a disinfectant. And so hiding stuff is not what I want to do. I'd rather have it out there and say, here's what's working, here's what's not, and we're not doing fine on all 22, we're doing fine on 11 of them, and that's fine. And trying to get our system to be cohesive, simple, and transparent is what that efficiency is all about.
I think there's some advanced economies who would like to hire you out. Efficiency.
Like a hole in the head.
So,
I do this for 5 years, and I'm going to be sitting on that side of the chair.
So I want to pivot and talk about another priority of yours that you wrote about in the Financial Times article, which was energy security. And it feels like there's a bit of a shift in thinking, a shift in focus going on with the Mission 300 project, and also kind of a review, if you will, of the bank's energy financing policy, including reviewing nuclear as an energy source. Talk to us a little bit about that. Where are we going with nuclear? Where are we going with the project, bigger picture?
So, I mean, you've probably heard me speak at civil society town halls and earlier about the importance of gas as a transition fuel. Of the 5% of our annual financing that goes into energy, 1% has gone to gas, 4% has gone to every other form of mostly renewable energy, geothermal, hydroelectric, solar, and wind. Nothing to nuclear for 60 years now. My belief is that all the old calculations of electricity requirement and the ability to deliver those with that mix of energy mix is not going to work, because AI is going to change everything by a factor of who knows what multiple. And so in July last year, I asked the IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, to come across to the World Bank to speak to our board about the possibility of us reconsidering nuclear financing. And we did a preliminary strategy conversation with the board. As you can imagine, it was a fairly divided conversation. Some countries were very supportive. Others thought that I was completely crazy. And others were like, let's see what happens when he finishes with this. Completely understandable. Fast forward, I met a number of people in different parliamentary systems. One of them, I think, is coming here to speak. You've got French coming in a little while. I met French. I met people in the US Congress. I met people in Europe with the European commissioners and in the European parliaments. I met people in Africa and Asia. And everybody indicated a level of interest in the topic of nuclear, in addition to gas as the transition fuel. So I kind of came back and said, I think I'm on the right side of this. And I'd like to find a way to get us to be a constructive partner in this. Now, that doesn't mean I can see the World Bank going out tomorrow morning and financing a $50 billion nuclear plant in some country, because we know whatever be the estimate, it's going to take twice the time and twice the cost, a bit like your apartment renovation. Right? Whatever estimate your contractor gives you, good luck with that. It's twice the amount and twice the time. And if somebody has a contractor as a family member, I apologize, right? But that's been my experience in the last 15 years. And so nuclear is a bit like that. So I don't know that's what I want to do. But can I help with extending the life of existing plants? Can I go with the IAEA on missions to help do that? Can I begin to look at small modular reactors and try and figure out how do we get from here to there? Meaning everybody's talking about this technology as the thing that will come, but nobody's seen it come yet. And so could we be the catalyst that helps in some way to help with the IAEA to create standards, to focus on one or two versions compared to the other two? Could we take a position of, like in solar cells or computer chips, if you place a last enough order, will you bring down the cost per unit? I don't know. Or Operation Warp Speed, when COVID happened, and the fact that the US government came back to support the idea for Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J to go out there and produce the vaccine. You know, we've got to start thinking like that, because otherwise we're waiting for Godot, and I ain't waiting for Godot. So that's what I'm trying to get into with nuclear. I don't know that I have all the answers yet. In June, we're going to go back to the board with a discussion on the full nuclear piece, the full gas piece, the full renewable energy, and talk about this as a way to help with transitions, but also as a way to enable access to affordable energy across the world. We cannot have 600 million people in Africa without electricity and then tell them, you got to wait for solar and wind to come your way, because we all know you need base load. And base load will come from geothermal, hydro, gas, or nuclear. That's the four ways to get base load. There is no other way. And, you know, that's what I'm working on.
So you mentioned AI, and we're in a digital economy increasingly. Kristalina and John talked about this a little bit in the prior session. You need electricity to get AI going.
I'm going to give the mic back to John.
He'd be great. How are you thinking about AI? What lessons from MasterCard are you bringing to your seat today as you think about these economies? We know it's going to unlock so much opportunity.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was speaking to someone last night who's at one of the big LLM companies saying he's really worried in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to have major job displacement. So how do we incorporate that conversation with countries that are still struggling to get electricity? How does it all come together?
I think the job displacement issue,
that's more here.
Developed world conversation. And I think it has something to do with professional service jobs before anything else, which is an interesting problem and a serious problem. But that's not my area of expertise. Although I could, if I'm not the World Bank president, it is my area of expertise from my prior life, but not an appropriate conversation for me here. For me, it's the emerging markets I'm concerned with. And I'll tell you my concern there and the positive. The concern is that big AI requires 4 things. Computing power, lots of it. Electricity, a heck of a lot of it. Data, lots of it, the more the better, kept in its simplest form so it can be manipulated properly, with safety, privacy, and security guaranteed. That's a lot of ifs. And then the fourth item is you need people who understand how to manipulate that to create the algorithms and capacity to create the predictive power of AI. I don't know too many emerging markets that have those four things, right? And then I have the concern that data tends to be seen very quickly as a national security item. And so the cross-border transshipment of large quantities of data of your citizenry, the more you do it and the more you combine it with others, the more the predictive power of the data. But now you are getting into lots of nationalism and lots of national security challenges with the data. So I don't know how easy this will be in the coming 5-6 years. That's the first part. That's big AI. Small AI, which is, to my mind, can I use data about soil testing patterns in a country to build fertilizers that are appropriate for the different regions of that country? So we give nitrogenous fertilizer where it's needed and phosphatic where it's needed. That I could see as a really cool thing.
Right.
Can I use that same kind of AI to help with crop insurance in that country? Possibly. So I want to divorce this global AI concept with large OECD Chinese firms who will fight for supremacy. And that's a fair fight. That is my prior life. It's perfectly fine. But I've got to be careful whether that will really work for the emerging markets or whether small AI is a better bet for the World Bank to help get them used to the idea of the power of this information to change their daily lives and impact those jobs that I want to create, as compared to worrying about the negative spin around the other four ideas. And so that's where I'm going. Now, it's early days in our thinking, but that's kind of where we are.
So using AI to make the World Bank itself more efficient.
Oh, that work is already
right.
happening. I mean, we're doing stuff with AI currently. We do things from, in Brazil, we used AI to work on tracking and figuring out fraud in government procurement systems. That stuff's already going on. I'm declaring that as it'll happen and it'll grow.
Right.
I'm talking about a much bigger concept.
Getting it into some of the emerging
Into
markets
every
so they can
country's-
get used to it and it
You
can
got it.
become part of the ecosystem,
You
even
got
if
it.
they're not the next OpenAI or Anthropic.
You got it.
Yes.
Employees and working with the countries already working with to start using AI, you should take that as something I'm doing anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about a much bigger issue.
That's good. I didn't realize you were using it so much within the World Bank.
It's there I just give you the example of Brazil. I could give you examples of underwriting for MSMEs and for micro entrepreneurs. There's a whole series of uses. Now, on a scale of 0 to 10, I think we're at 3 on 10 or 2 on 10. But I'm kind of, if you get to 6, I'll move the bar. So we go back to 3. So that's just.
Okay. So
That's how I work.
So we're in a world today where advanced economies in particular have very limited fiscal space. We're seeing foreign aid cut by some countries, including here in the United States. So the World Bank getting support from the private sector becomes all the more important. We were here in October, and we had the pleasure of having Shriti Videra from the Private Sector Investment Lab come speak with us. And there was a lot of great rhetoric. I would love to get a progress report from you.
Sure.
What are we seeing actually happen?
Sure. So just to be clear, I actually don't think the private sector importance has anything to do with the reduced aid. I think the aid amount is a pimple on a dimple on an ant's left cheek compared to what is required for development to actually happen. You can look at anybody's estimates of anything, and it's trillions a year. Whether it's energy, it's poverty, it's food security, it's trillions. So if aid reduces in ODA terms from X% to Y%, that's lovely, it's a rounding error. The real issue is there is not enough money in governments, even the richest ones. there isn't enough money in MDB balance sheets, no matter how many tricks we play with loan-to-equity ratios and hybrid capital and portfolio guarantees and all that. And there isn't enough money in philanthropies either. You have to get the private sector where it makes business sense with the right rules of the game to be a player in that space. That's the logic of the private sector lab. And it predates all this current circumstance of 8.
Yeah.
The lab's got 5 work streams, which came out from the conversations. The first one was, if I don't have regulatory policy certainty, I'm not taking my money to that country. I'm going to take my marbles and play elsewhere. That I already spoke to. That's what 300 million mission is all about. We're doing this. That's where the pay for our results with our 50-odd% of our DPO money is. That's all connected to that idea. The second one was, even if I do that, I need political risk insurance. We used to do insurance in different parts of the bank. We put it together under MEGA. We are simplifying its structure, making it easier to access. We're already up 30% compared to last year. The stuff has all been put together. Getting it put together was an interesting experience in an institution like the World Bank. But we got it done. And now we're in the process of figuring out simplified due diligence, simplified ESF, simplified processes. My ambition is at least doubling, if not trebling, the insurance business by 2030. The third thing was, would you be willing to take us, junior equity, first loss, to get projects in the emerging markets that may not meet the exact standard of return for the private sector, but are close enough to get pushed over the edge? And that sounds like a great idea in terms of catalyzing private investment. The problem is, if we actually book the loss, at some point, I have to go back to my shareholders to get capital. And that's not a pleasant experience. So I'm trying to figure out a way to avoid the unpleasantness of that while getting to first loss. And we've created a fund called the Frontier Opportunities Fund. Started off with 100 million of our own retained earnings in IFC. But now we're out there shopping it to philanthropies and others to join us so we can create the catalytic capital in first loss terms that needs to be going in to get this work done. We don't need trillions. We need a couple of $1 billion because the multiplier effect is very large of that catalytic capital. The fourth item was, can you help with foreign exchange? And foreign exchange is the holy grail. If you're investing in Indonesia and it's a 30-year project and you're going to be having a 30-year exposure to the Indonesian rupiah, that's complicated.
Yeah.
By the way, a 30-year exposure to the euro is pretty complicated too. And these days, it's to the US dollar as well. It's pretty complicated too. So I just think that believing that you can get a 30-year hedge is not going to happen. So what I'm trying to do there is increase our local currency mobilization by doing swaps with local banks for their and local corporates for their currency availability, and then using that to fund projects. And
so it's all local
currency. It's all happening. And the IFC is now almost 40% of its financing is local currency. It was 20-odd% a little while ago. I won't get to 80 by doing this. I've got to find other tricks of the trade to get past that. And then the last item, to me, is the most exciting. And that's what Doug Peterson, whom some of you know used to run S&P till recently, he's leading that for us, is that can we create an asset class in some of these things, in infrastructure, in water, in things like that. You see, the whole issue with, I know we run out of time, but I'm going to finish this. The whole issue is this thing of trillions from the billions out of the pipe dream, because the trillions are sitting with pension funds and asset managers. Pension fund CIOs don't invest money project by project. The way they look at their book is, can you get me, if I go to a pension fund and say, hey, CPP, whatever it's called, Canadian Pension Plan, if you are interested in exposure to water, I could give you loans. And then I give him 20 loans, in 18 countries, 20 million here, 100 million there, 15 million there, bespoke agreements. He's going to say, go away and come back when you grow up. But if you package it together with standardized loans, with a rating agency wrapper on it that says this package put together is B+ paper, and you can buy it at 94 cents to the dollar. Now they'll say this fits in my risk-return matrix in the following way. That's how the mortgage market got built in the US. It's what we need to do with this class. That's what we're working on. It's the hardest item. It's the biggest pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And thank God, as Doug is driving it for us, along with BlackRock and a few asset managers and pension funds, and we'll see where we go. But that's the work going on. All 5 items are tangible. There's work in progress. There's actual outcomes. And
that last one, probability you get there during your tenure?
Pretty high.
More than 50?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that. Yeah. Listen, thank you so much for your time, always, your candor. I'm excited to go on your website and check all your metrics, but we really...
Don't write me complaints. I get enough as it is.
Thank you so much, President.
Thanks. Ajay.